Also, if you've not been to one of these programs, the flow of this hour will be, we'll do a little bit of a reflective prompt that's kind of parallel to the subject matter of our presentation today. This is an opportunity for you to unmute yourself and contribute, or pop into the chat and contribute. This is for our member engagement. This is for you to participate. Then we'll have our presenter, and we'll have times for questions, and our then at the end we'll have I'll go over some events that are happening with Master Naturalist, and a call to action as well. Hi, Linda. Oh, I'd also like to say thank you to Lynn Bauer, who's on today. She's really great with feedback and suggestions and ideas, and I really appreciate all of you. A lot of you send me suggestions, and I really, really appreciate it. It's the only way, because this program is for you. And so I really appreciate any kind of feedback or suggestions. And she suggested wetlands and different aspects of wetlands. So this is and Ted and I have had some fun conversations about what else we can do with maybe a wetland series potentially. So we'll have some further conversations about that. But thank you, Lynn. Okay, it's nice to see Marilyn Tabor's on. Melissa. Hi, Melissa. So great to see you all. Okay, I'm gonna continue to try to multitask and let people in, and we're just gonna go ahead and begin with a reflective prompt here to get us moving on with our. I want to respect all of your time. All right, now I need to get, okay. Okay, so go ahead, thank you. So in general, our reflective prompt today is about human dimensions. So feel free to unmute yourself, and let's kind of like tackle here for the next a little bit on what we think human dimensions are. What's your contribution here to what human dimensions are in context to conservation?
I think it's kind of related to what we as humans do to conserve, either not take away from nature or to go back and try to repair some of the damage that we've done to nature.
Thank you for contributing, Tobin. Judy, I see you're unmuted too.
Well, he kind of covered part of what I was gonna, or mine is part of what Tobin had, that
oh no, she froze. Oh, maybe she'll come back to us. Linda, I see that. Oh, I see you, Judy, but now you're muted. Judy, you're muted. Oh no. But I also see Linda. Maybe Judy will catch up with us here in just a minute, because we didn't hear you, Judy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got muted again.
Yeah, go ahead. Repeat yourself, please.
That on the personal level, I don't put pesticides, herbicides, or any of that stuff in my yard. I am not contributing to local damage. I have a small urban lot, but I have some pollinator plants and things like that. So it's not that much at the personal level, but that's in addition to what I do as a master naturalist, and also, encouraging my neighbors not to do it.
Thank you for contributing, Judy. I appreciate it. Linda, what is your contribution to what human dimensions are in context to conservation?
Similar to what they said, but also just education, interactions, and like Judy said, encouraging your neighbors or talking to your neighbors about things. It's formal and informal education.
Well done. Lovely. Glenn, I see. Hi, Glenn. I see you're unmuted. Did you have something to contribute?
Yeah, it's interesting. Fred and I were driving by Home Depot yesterday, and she looks out the window and said, we looked at all these plants they had out for fall planting, and she said, there's not one native plant there. What have we done to ourselves? What have we done? We've totally lost contact of what we have and introducing all these non-natives. So anyway, that's just my comment about we just have lost it. We think that anything exotic from some foreign country is better than what we have.
Thank you for your contribution, Glenn. Let's see, we have some things in the chat. We have the impact we have, whether that is good or bad. We need to value nature and the natural world. We need to look at nature as more than something to be exploited for monetary value. We need to understand that beauty, solitude, and wildlife are valuable. We are smart enough to change and constantly learning how we can improve and contribute to the health of our planet. Thank you for those who contributed to the chat. Melissa, I see that you're unmuted.
Yeah, I just, for me personally, it's sort of like a worldview that like your place in the natural world and that the human dimension is just one aspect in an interrelated system. And whether your proper place is through conservation, whether it's through pesticide use and reduction education, there's all kinds of ways that you can be a contributing member to the larger whole.
Thank you, Melissa. Randy, you have something too.
Yeah, I was just talking to my sister. She wants to remove some grass, and I said, "Well, why don't you put it in a pollinator garden?" Well, my grandson, I'm afraid of bees. So I thought fear might be one of those things. That's part of education, but just sort of reducing the fear that maybe people have built up inside their heads about nature being outside looking in.
Those were all, thank you all for contributing. I do have like a, we'll put some words on here. So human dimensions are the social, cultural, economic, psychological, political aspects of conservation, right? Those are all, and there's several others, right? But those aspects, right, of human dimensions are so important to conservation because they help us understand like other people's knowledge, people's values, and our behaviors, and how they are affected, how decisions and behavior change are affected, right? So all those kinds of human dimension aspects, right? And that's such a when I'm at master naturalist trainings, and I get to see over and over these instructors at our trainings, right, speak to human dimensions and the partnerships that are built, and not just with conservation biologists, but with landowners and students and people that have lived on the land for generations, and all of those pieces, because all humans are diverse, right? And our experiences and our knowledge and our relationship with nature. And so those dimensions are vast, right? And so it's a complicated, unique, and beautiful thing to have to consider human dimensions when we speak to conservation efforts in Nebraska. So I really appreciate, I really appreciate everybody's contributions. Let's see. Yep, we are smart enough to change and constantly learning how we can improve and contribute to the health of our planet. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and any final thoughts? Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and we will let me introduce our speaker. I'm really excited about this. So we have Ted LaGrange on today. Let me admit some of these folks. And he's a Wetland Program Manager with Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. I really value the story that Ted tells about the efforts in his career towards conservation, because so much of it is about partnership and the storytelling, and not just the science of it, right? And those human dimensions are so much a part of the story that he tells with the work of conservation that he does, and it's such a major theme in when he's doing an instruction at our trainings. I'm sure many of you have been through your training, have been with Ted when he's done his wetland program. So let me read his little bio here. Ted has worked with the Wetland Program as the Wetland Program Manager for the Game and Parks Commission for 31 years. As Wetland Program Manager, he works on a wide variety of wetland issues throughout Nebraska, including partnerships, private land restoration programs, public lands management, research, regulation, and outreach. Prior to moving to Nebraska, he worked for 8 years as a Waterfowl Research Technician for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and received his BS and MS degrees in wildlife biology from Iowa State University. So grateful to have you on with us today, Ted.
All right, wonderful to be here. Thanks, Jamie, and hello, everyone. Yeah, good to see some familiar names and faces there, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get the technology to work. So I've got a PowerPoint I'll share, and hopefully we can get this to all work.
I'm gonna take my picture down.
This. Okay, so you seeing that okay, Jamie?
It's looking great.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get started here. And yeah, your lead in was perfect, Jamie, because talking about human dimensions is something that we think about all the time, working in conservation in the state of Nebraska. So understanding what's driving people's decision making and thinking is really important, especially in a state like Nebraska when we talk private lands and having to work with private landowners. So I'll be touching on that today and how we use collaboration, which has a big human dimension part in helping us to be able to deliver that conservation for wetlands. So as Jamie said, I cover the whole state of Nebraska. I work with kind of all things wetland related, and we were chatting about topics, and this is one I offered, is, you know, kind of how we partner and collaborate. At the end, I have a few other options. So in the future, you know, maybe we can do some other things if the group is interested. But with that, I'll go ahead and get started. First off, you know, I think it's probably not a surprise to most of the people on this call, but you know, Nebraska is home to a huge diversity of different types of wetlands and different landscapes. And a lot of people who drive, you know, Interstate 80 across the state, if that's all they ever do, they're not aware of all this amazing diversity that we have. And it plays a big role in driving how we deliver conservation on the landscape. And I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about kind of tailoring our approach to the different landscapes in the state and the different socioeconomic drivers that we have to consider. And obviously, you know, we're probably, everyone on this call is really interested in the biodiversity that wetlands support. I showed this slide at the most recent Master Naturalist training. So a few of you who were there might have seen this and seen this amazing catalog of imagery. And huge shout out to the folks at the Platte Basin Time Lapse Group for a project that I'm not going to go into on this call, but a Wetlands of Nebraska outreach and education project. They generated, you know, 5 films and like all these amazing photographs. So, but it does play a role in the outreach and helping people understand, you know, the diversity of landscapes and habitat and wildlife that we have to deal with here in Nebraska. So huge credit to them for their amazing photography. But then getting to kind of the human dimensions part of it, you know, if we're partnering, we have to understand what's driving people and making their decisions. And whether it be ranchers or farmers or people doing outdoor recreation, you know, it has to have a human component to be relevant to people. And as surprising as it might be to all of us, not everybody thinks the way we do or makes their decisions the way we do. And so understanding what's driving some of those decisions, how to best work with people to make positive change, positive conservation happen for wetlands and other conservation measures is really super important to be able to understand. And finally, in a state like Nebraska, you know, water is a huge factor, water quantity, water quality issues. And so I think one thing, whether you hunt or watch wildlife or farm or live in an urban setting, you know, we all rely on good quality water, good quantity of water. And so I think that's a common conservation tie that we can work into a lot of what we do in conservation. And we certainly do that in wetlands as well. So basically today, I'm just kind of going to go through and describe some of the different ways we have some of the different partnerships that we have put together in Nebraska. Talk a little bit about some keys from my viewpoint on what makes them successful, and then share some of the positive benefits that collaboration has, being able to work with those people that maybe think a little differently than we do, and how we can work towards having a positive outcome on that. So with this, that is just a reminder. Jamie read my bio, but I actually work with a group within our wildlife division at Game and Park called Habitat Partners section. So how appropriate is that to talk about partnerships? Because that's a big part of what I do, is working collaboratively with different partners. You know, I probably work with, you know, hundreds of different landowners and probably nearly 100 different agencies and organizations across the state on wetland conservation initiatives. And I do have a statement here, you know, that a lot of what I've learned, a lot of what I talk about is really Nebraska, amazingly, you know, has a super strong record of collaborative partnership conservation. And that culture was here when I came. We've tried to sustain that. And I think it's really remarkable how well that's worked in Nebraska. And when you go to other states, you know, people will talk about what's going on in Nebraska. How are you working with ranchers and farmers and being able to deliver conservation in a collaborative way? And it's something about the culture we have here. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but just a really important part of what we do and what we work on. So shift now. Some of you have seen this. This is a map out of the Guide to Nebraska Wetlands, and I'll share the link to that at the end of this presentation for a lot more information about wetlands. But you know, when we think about the state of Nebraska, we divided wetlands into kind of some major groupings, and that's what these colors represent: playa wetlands, riverine, saline and alkali wetlands, and then the vast sandhills of north central Nebraska. And so each of these has very different wetland types, very different socioeconomic drivers that influence how we might work in those given landscapes. So again, just a way to think about how we structure our thinking a little bit when we're developing partnerships and developing conservation approaches. So, and again, this huge variety, whether this is a playa wetland in the rainwater basin, you know, hiding behind a cornfield here. So very intensively farmed part of the state. Irrigated agriculture is dominant there. Lots of use of again, irrigation water, very valuable land. So those little playas are hotspots of biodiversity in this landscape, but you're not going to be able to work on them without understanding what's driving that corn or soybean farmer and trying to find things that can work for them and for the wetland and the wildlife at the same time. The same in the sandhills of Nebraska, 20,000 square miles of pretty intact grassland, an amazing ranching community there that does value the stewardship of those fragile lands. They want the grass, they want the water. You know, that's what we want from a conservation perspective as well. So a lot of really good overlap there, but we certainly think differently on our approach to, you know, what drives some of our decision making but I think there again is a lot of opportunity to have a successful partnership and collaboration in that landscape as well. And again, like I showed earlier, this is huge diversity of wetland types across the state, saline wetlands and playas out in farm fields, and riverine wetlands like the lower left one that's like along the Elkhorn River, and then streams and throughout the state that have wetlands associated with them. So, and then with that, again, emphasizing that there's these different drivers that make people that help drive people's decision, whether it be recreationally or what they're doing to make a living on that land. And that comes again from farmers, ranchers, acreage owners, people in an urban landscape. Some of the human dimensions talk at the beginning was about, what people do on their lawn and in that urban landscape. And that's also really important and something that we need to continue to work on. And so again, thinking of the state of Nebraska, that one size fits all does not work, in the state of Nebraska. And so you have to tailor the actions that we develop and the approach we use to the different local heritage, socioeconomic drivers, and for these different parts of the state. So really, that's kind of a big take-home message, is that you have to understand who you're working with, where you're working, what you're trying to accomplish, and then figure what you can do to make some things happen in a positive manner in those different landscapes. And this is kind of a complicated slide. Sorry about that. But it's just taking like those wetland complexes I showed you, playas, riverine, saline alkali, and the sandhills, and overlaying some of the different partnerships I work on in the kind of yellow boxes. So again, throughout the state, we have, and I'll touch on these a little bit more just a little bit later in the presentation. And there's lots more partnerships. And then I do reference the Natural Legacy Plan for Nebraska and BULs, which are biologically unique landscapes. That's a big driver in how we structure our conservation work in the state of Nebraska, is that Natural Legacy Plan. And but just to give you an idea of the breadth of some of the different things we work on in different places, and I'll go into just a little bit more detail on that on a few of these that I'm most involved with. So this is a quote I always like, that in wetland science, restoration and management, it's often complicated. And we had a coordinator of the rainwater basin who always used to like to say, when you get to the edge of your knowledge, ask for help. And whether that was directed at me, maybe it was, maybe I'm at the edge of my knowledge there in that picture. So looking for the next thing. So, but it's really important. We all have expertise. We all have perspectives, but we don't know everything, and we don't have perspectives on everything. And so being able to reach out and get help, listen to people, understand what their issues are, and trying to find where there's some common ground is really super important. And so we need to get input from lots of different people in wetlands, different disciplines, whether it be a soil scientist, a GIS specialist, a botanist, an engineer, surveyor. I am a wildlife biologist. I know a fair amount about wetlands, but there's lots and lots I don't know about. And so I reach out to get help from these people who do have expertise that maybe I or some of our team does not have. And also hugely important in a state like Nebraska, where 97+% of our lands are privately owned, is the landowner's often someone we're partnering with. And it's really important to understand they're out there every day. They understand their land. They may, again, not think the way we do, but they have a lot of expertise that we can gather from working with them. So when we do private lands projects, our staff that work on those, it's really important to listen, to understand what's driving their decision making, and try to find out again where those kind of win-win situations are. And so we do a lot through GIS and remote work and technology. That's all super valuable. But again, getting kind of back to human dimensions, developing a relationship with that individual, respecting them, listening to them, and trying to chart a positive way forward is just really super important. And so this whole idea of partnering is it's really important to emphasize that, you know, this idea of the whole can be, you know, more than the sum of its parts, that by collaborating with different people, different perspectives, different expertise, different disciplines, we can have a lot better impact on the conservation work that we're trying to accomplish. And so using this like Venn diagram, you know, that between like agencies and organizations and landowners is kind of what I used here. You could use different things in this, but kind of again where that overlap is like as an agency, Game and Parks, we're not always going to be on board with an organization like Ducks Unlimited. We don't think exactly alike, or Audubon, or, you know, you name your organization or your agency, and the same with landowners. But there are areas where we have overlap and where we have can find some of that common ground. And that's where we can actually partner or actually have a true partnership. And I'll talk a little bit about the difference kind of between partnering is a little bit more of a one-time kind of transactional agreement, and partnerships, which I'll spend more time talking about, are a little longer. I like to refer to them more like a marriage, or a little longer, a little more structured. And so they're different than just like a one-time agreement to get a project done. So they're just a little bit of a way to think about how we work in different partnerships. And again, I'll talk about a few of those as I wrap up towards the end of this. So one of the things that I have learned is that, you know, successful partnerships are not forged from the top down. And I've seen a lot of attempts at this. You know, the director or governor or whoever, you know, kind of leader of the organization comes in and just says, okay, you guys are all going to work together and be happy about it, right? And it's like, if the groundwork's not laid and the timing's not right, you know, those are not necessarily going to be successful. The partnerships I've been involved with are really about people at the field level getting together, talking about what the needs are, what's going to be successful, and then actually working that kind of from the bottom up, saying, hey, we've got this opportunity to collaborate. Let's make something happen here. This is another one. I work in government, so right, we always have to have some agreement. And we do have to have an agreement, you know, when we're working, you know, with money or things like that. But some people get really focused on all it's about is some signed agreement. So again, thinking a top-down approach, well, we have this signed agreement. Why aren't you all just working happily together? And again, it's because it has to be this bottom-up approach of people on the ground, closest to the land, understanding and agreeing what they're going to be working on, and kind of being on the same page that way. So money's needed, but it's also not all about the money. One of the things that Steve Moran, who was the Rainwater Basin Coordinator when I first started here, I have several quotes from Steve, but he said one of the best things about the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture Partnership is we had no money when we started. And so we actually had to figure out and dream, like, if we got some money sometime, what should we do? What would be our priority? And sometimes I've seen where a lot of money is just handed out and people then start to just kind of squabble over the money, right? Instead of thinking about it again from that bottom-up approach of how do we make things happen in a positive way? What do we want to have happen there? Now, that said, we do need money. And one of the things that really proud about in Nebraska is that the partnerships that we've been involved with for wetlands, you know, I kind of did a quick summary, you know, over the past 30 years or so, there's been more than $130 million made available for wetland conservation. That's like 230 different grant awards from 30 different sources. So lots of creativity from lots of different people to find ways to get funding, to make things happen that we want to have happen that are again, positive for wetland conservation. And then that leads to, I put this little chart together. You don't need to study all the details on it clearly, but it lists a lot of agencies and organizations, and over the past 30 years, how they've grown their capacity meaning human capital. You know, what do we have for people to go out and deliver conservation? If that's going to be done from the bottom up, you have to have some people on the ground, knocking on landowners' door, designing a project. And the ones in green are agencies and organizations that either weren't in existence 30 years ago or didn't have any staff in Nebraska. So again, you can just see Ducks Unlimited, a great example of an organization, been around a long time, they didn't have anybody focused just on Nebraska conservation delivery when I started, and now like they have 9 people. Pheasants Forever, even more. They had 1 person, and now they've grown to like 39 or whatever that number is. So 38. So just a huge increase in capacity. It's one of the things we use some of that extra funding for. And so when you add that up, you know, we have about 135 biologists who are now doing work in the state that weren't doing that work 30 years ago. And so, and it's just a huge benefit that's come about due to the collaborative efforts. And again, a lot of creative energies, a lot of people who found a way to say yes to things and to make good, positive things happen. So successful partnerships, you know, they require this social capital. It's about relationships, and that takes time. And again, that's why it can't be forced from the top down. This is an example of the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership. I'll touch more on that in a moment, where we work together. A number of us have worked together for a long time, 20 years, several of us. And, you know, over that time, you develop the trust, communications, this consistent participation. If it's always just someone wearing a hat representing an agency, but it's a different person each time, that doesn't lead to that trust, because trust is about individuals, not about agencies or organizations. And so a really important point in thinking about how we operate. Now, I know I left somebody's logo off here, but I've got a lot on there. So, and added a few just for this presentation. But again, lots of different organizations and entities providing funding, capacity, helping with wetland delivery. And there's things in there like Nebraska Cattlemen that we've worked with, and they've actually held grants to do good wetland work. And so some surprise, some, you know, things you would expect, organizations you would expect, and others that maybe are a little bit of a surprise that are involved with helping deliver conservation in the state of Nebraska. So I'll close up with talking about just a few of the partnerships that I've been probably most involved with. And one is the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture. And so that's mostly focused on South Central Nebraska, this playa wetland landscape, heavily farmed, irrigated agriculture. But that board works with farmers. We have a number of farmers on the board. The natural resource districts are represented. It's an important landscape for millions of migrating water birds, including whooping cranes, but also waterfowl shown in the bottom left. You know, we have a plan that everyone's agreed to, and plans can be boring and all that, but they are needed because they kind of keep the direction and focus together. It's really easy for a partnership to start to splinter and go off in different directions unless they have some common plan. And so you'll see a little bit of a theme in this, that by having the right people in the mix, on the right focus on what you're working on, and the right plan, that you end up doing some really neat things. And, you know, this is just an example of a project we were involved with where we acquired a wetland that was drained with a bunch of drainage pits. So this is Straightwater wildlife area over in Seward County, named Straightwater because it had some big straight drainage pits in it. It's not Straightwater anymore. You can see on the bottom there, after restoration, we filled those pits, took out some sediment, battled some invasive species here, much better habitat for waterfowl and shorebirds, some of the other water birds, things we're targeting, than that drained wetland that was being farmed prior to doing the work that was done there. So the Saline Wetlands Conservation Partnership I mentioned is a very different focus on an urban landscape near Lincoln. Again, focusing on these very rare and unique saline wetlands. We have a plan to work on that. Coordinators hired by the city of Lincoln, Natural Resource District, and Pheasants Forever are involved in this collaboration. And again, here's an example of a wetland pre and post restoration work done through the efforts of the partnership up at our Jackson Wildlife Area by Ceresco and the Saunders Lancaster County line. And so again, you can see from a saline wetland, a wetland wildlife standpoint, a water standpoint, a lot more filtering, a lot more water being held back to reduce flooding downstream by the work done post-restoration by filling some drainage ditches and things than what we had before that project was undertaken. And again, huge number of partners involved with this, lots of funding from the Nebraska Environmental Trust, many other entities involved in this project. And finally, a very different one that I'm involved with is the Sandhills Task Force. So it's a rancher-led organization in the Sandhills in Nebraska. I'm not a rancher, obviously. I don't try to pretend to be one. You have to be genuine when you work in these partnerships. If I showed up at one of their meetings in a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, I'd be laughed out of the room because that's not who I am, and I wouldn't be able to pull that off. But I work with a bunch of amazing ranchers who, again, are committed to conserving the sandhills, but also sustaining private profitable ranching, which keeps the water and grass resources in place, and have this really cool strategic plan that they've worked on. And again, here's an example of a project they just wrapped up earlier this year in northern Cherry County. This is Bear Creek. Bear Creek had been channelized, and so all the little squiggly things you see off on the left side, at least my left on this, that's a stream that was remeandered. It had all been straightened. It was a straight line. So where you see the big bodies of water, that was a straight line that had this channelized creek in it. So we went in and we rewound that creek into bends and turns, trying to reestablish it in its old channel, and then put wetlands in place where the old channel had been. And again, Ducks Unlimited, the Sandhills Task Force, Fish and Wildlife Service, Game and Parks, bunch of entities involved in this, but really cool, see huge benefits to fish and to wildlife with a project like this, and again, our water resources. So wrapping up here, that, the kind of some take home recommendations is just focusing on areas with that similar natural and human resources. So figuring out what the type of wetland, the type of natural conservation landscape you're wanting, and then what are the human drivers, again, getting back to Jamie and your discussion at the beginning, the human dimensions aspects. So I can't emphasize enough that it takes time and personal relationships. Most of the partnerships I've been involved with, some have been 20, 30 years in the making. And so they don't happen overnight. And a lot of us, it's really easy to get impatient and wonder why something didn't happen this quarter or this year, and realize that if you're developing that trust and those personal relationships, that takes time, and you have to allow time for that to happen. This idea of a plan is important. So I kind of touched on that. And then a go-to person who's kind of a coordinator, a person who's kind of 24/7, thinking about what are we doing to make this successful. And we have that in the Rainwater Basin with Andy Bishop, with the Saline Partnership with Tom Malmstrom, and the Sandhills with like Shelley Kelly, who's the coordinator of that effort. So just really important to have those people in place helping with that collaboration. And so with that, just thanks for your attention and participating. Thanks, Jamie, for organizing this. I'd mentioned if you want to learn more about wetlands, nebraskawetlands.com. That QR code you can take a picture of as well. That will take you to our wetlands section of the Game and Parks website. And you can certainly learn more there and see some of the amazing work Platte Basin Time Lapse did as well. Their 5 feature films and the wetland guide and things are all available at that site. So encourage you to check that out. And maybe, Jamie, before we open it up to questions, I did put this slide in, which is, so we covered today partnerships, and Jamie and I were brainstorming, like she mentioned, about future topics. And obviously you can't be you could be all wetlands all the time, but I suppose you want to mix it up with some other stuff. But, in the future, if there's interest in one of these topics, reach out to Jamie, or Jamie, you can send this out to people, and because there's lots of different ways we could do maybe a 30-minute presentation to talk a little more in depth about some of the things we work on in the wetland side of things. So.
Thanks for adding that, Ted. We have evaluations. I talk about these all the time when we do these Master Naturalist Mondays. If you see something up here for future topics about wetlands, like put that into your evaluation. That's a great way. Or just shoot me an email. That's easy too, and I can get that on the list for sure.
And you'll be sharing this PowerPoint out, so they'll have this list and also the website. So
yep, yeah, all the in Ted's presentation, and we'll all go out in the email to everybody.
Okay, let me stop sharing here then, Jamie.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's get some questions for Ted. Does anybody have any questions or even any feedback, or just contribute to some more dialogue, some more questions? I'll start off with just saying trust is about individuals, not agencies. I really loved that. That's really great, because that's it's like about the heart that people have. And also, how many of us in Nebraska have seen what a natural meandering creek really looks like? What historically on top of the landscape, snaking across the prairie like that. That was a beautiful image. Wow.
Yeah, I need to, we have a before one. I need to work that before one in so you can see this channelized stretch, and then, yeah, how it's changed. So
I've only seen, the first time I saw a stream sit on top like that was when I was in Mongolia doing stream work. And I was like, oh, is this what streams in Nebraska are? I didn't know.
yeah,
But it's very similar, ecosystem and structure. It was really, oof.
yeah.
What else do you folks have? Any questions for Ted? Let's see, is anybody in the chat? Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, Ted, I'm still,
Hey, Glenn.
one of my little whole wetland that's about had a size of a urban yard. I'm still trying to get rid of the bullfrogs. They managed to eat all my leopard frogs. And
Yep.
I killed off all the, with Rotno, the goldfish that were in there, but I still, and I don't think you've got an answer for bullfrogs either, how to get rid of them.
No, the only thing is with bullfrogs is the tadpole stage does have to overwinter. And so if you don't have fish in there, you're concerned about.
No.
If you let it dry out or pump it out or whatever, if you have that capability over winter, then that's what kills out bullfrogs in a lot of our smaller wetlands, and why things like leopard frogs and chorus frogs, those smaller frogs, can make a go of it, is because they don't compete with the bullfrogs in those really shallow wetlands that freeze during the winter.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good to see you, Glenn.
Okay, folks.
I see a chat question there popped up, Jamie.
There we go.
I don't know if there's a few more.
We do have some in there. Okay. I was do these projects utilize volunteer resources, and how would one do that? That's a great question for master naturalists, for sure. Thanks, Deb.
Yep, potentially, some of these obviously we don't have that capability for, well, unless we have some engineers or soil scientists. Again, depends on what someone's background is, because we have used retired engineers, that go back to work for NRCS. They're not in the Master Naturalist project, but and yeah, Kim is just talking about, she mentioned the Game and Parks one. We're using a volunteer master naturalist here to help us with management of the cattails and dogwood and things that are kind of invading that. So I think there's certainly potential that way. Potential, everybody's got contacts. So if, there's people who, if any of the master naturalists know of people who could have a potential wetland project on their land, we're always willing to talk to people that way. So, and then finally, there's just a lot. I see also there was a question, you'll probably get to it, about, plant and animal response or something to wetland restorations. And I think there's a lot in the monitoring side of things that a master naturalist could do. Water quality, what's amphibian community, what's the plant community, dragonflies, all kinds of different things that we have an interest, but we don't have time to go back and visit these sites. So
I was gonna speak to that. I'm glad. I was like, well, my thoughts always are perfect contribution for Master Naturalists in conservation is the monitoring part, right? Like that,
Mhm.
you know. So that could be a partnership, y'all. I'm gonna write it down in my to-do list.
Yeah, just, some of these sites are on public lands that people could easily get access to. Others are on private lands and, you'd have to work out with that farmer, rancher, acreage owner, whoever, but to be honest, a lot of the people we work with, of course, they go out and look at it if it's on their property, but they're also, we do a bad job of, we, meaning me, or, us in general, and we run on to the next project, and sometimes we don't do enough follow-up with that landowner to tell them, wow, look at all the ducks or herons or whatever using this site. It really worked well. And we don't have time to do that because we're running on to the next project or working on the next grant or whatever. So, if you had someone out there monitoring, getting feedback to that individual, or even our wildlife area manager, because they don't have time to do it either. And they'd be interested, like, oh, wow, that's cool. So, or if something isn't working, we want to know that too. So,
is the wetland area near the Game and Parks building restored?
yeah, Kim, I saw that question flash up. That's one that Tim Albin, the master naturalist, is helping us with management on. Kind of depends. I would consider that kind of a creation in the sense that we're in a really urban landscape here at Game and Parks. There's a creek running nearby. It runs through East Campus called Dead Man's Run. Historically, that probably meandered all over this area. In fact, I often tell people, I bet you there were even saline wetlands where Game and Parks is. But it's been developed for 150 years or whatever, and people have hauled in fill and they've channelized that creek. And so historically, there was a meandering creek through this area with lots of little oxbow and wet meadow wetlands and things. So, but where we put that wetland, we didn't have evidence that, like, yeah, this is exactly where that wetland was. We just excavated out some material and route water from our parking lot into it to have a little wetland on site here.
Any advice for gaining trust or working to promote understanding with the public when they ask questions about restoration projects that appear at first glance to be destructive?
Destructive.
So in my mind, and you
Unmute
yourself, Paige, if you want to explain, but in my mind, like a bunch of the trees were taken out over at Wood Duck Wildlife Management area over here, right? And the people did not like that.
Yeah.
I think maybe that piece too.
Yeah, the sites always look terrible when we get done with the restoration, right? Because if the site's highly altered, with like that stream we rechannelized, you have big yellow machines come in and do that work. And when you look at that site right afterwards, it looks like it's been, really, really altered, right? And we need to do a better job of communicating. We'll put out a news release. We'll have a meeting with landowners that we're going to be doing this project, but sometimes we don't have a sign on the site. And so a hunter or a bird watcher or whatever pulls into the parking lot and says, what in the world did they do and why? We get a lot of questions on our grazing management. We're grazing for a conservation purpose. We just had one a couple of weeks ago on one of our saline wetlands. Some people were concerned about the amount of grazing, and we had to explain why we're grazing, what our target is, and what that benefits. And so I think we need to just do a better job. And again, maybe that's where master naturalists could help with some of that as well, just providing some signage. We'd work with them on getting the language right and describing, when we're talking burning, grazing, tree removal from a prairie wetland, sediment removal, which again, big yellow machinery moving around, describing what we do. We've had some articles in Nebraska Land Magazine. Again, we'll put out that news release. We'll do some social media messaging on it. But yeah, getting that word out more would definitely be helpful.
We have a couple more questions. What's a good elevator speech for the general public regarding wetland pests like mosquitoes? That was a good one, Randy.
Yeah, wetlands certainly can harbor mosquitoes, but a healthy wetland actually also has a lot of predators that eat mosquitoes and keep them somewhat in balance. So you're not going to have a wetland without mosquitoes, but we get that a lot in an urban landscape. And it's often those super shallow areas, some that aren't even really wetlands, that produce most of the mosquitoes. And areas with a little deep, especially areas in an urban setting where mosquitoes can be an issue, can be designed in a way to be a little deeper. And if they're just slightly deeper, then you get a predator insect community in there that really knocks back the mosquito larvae. And I have a neighbor behind me. We have a little commons area, and he's concerned about mosquitoes, and he puts some BT, the natural bacteria that impacts their larvae in that site. So in an urban setting like that, maybe that's something that could be an alternative. So, but I think you have to say it's not like there's not a few downsides, but the upsides of things like improved water quality and flood control and things can outweigh that downside.
Thank you.
That was a long elevator ride. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great question, Randy. Just a really quick here. Diane says that she volunteers at Heron Haven Wetland in the heart of Omaha, and they are always looking for volunteers, and they're managed by the Papio, Missouri NRD. So just letting you folks know. Thanks for heads up on that, Diane.
That's a cool area. And we did visit that with one of the urban wetland film. We talked to the manager there, and it's in that film that Platte Basin Time Lapse did. So yeah, it's a cool area.
If you all don't know about Platte Basin Time Lapse, they do a great job storytelling with video and imagery and sound about covering the different wetlands, and then not just the wetlands, but also the people that are in relation to those wetlands as well, whether they're landowners or they are researchers or they are conservationists that have spent their life, trying to protect these areas. So I'll send that link out in the email as well. One last question.
Those films are all on the Game and Park site, the wetland ones, but you could share there. They also have a lot of other films too. So, but the 5 they did on wetlands, or plus the lesson plans Grace worked on, and yeah, those are all on our Game and Parks website.
The NebraskaWetlands.com. Okay.
Yeah, but they also have a lot of other neat stuff they do. So definitely.
One last question. Do you reach out to landowners about wetland projects more or less than landowners reach out to you? And then why is that the case?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. One of the things in our private land section I work in, we talk a lot about most landowners would not come to Game and Parks. Just they think we're conservation officers and we run state parks, or like we're park rangers, right? They maybe know about wildlife areas, but very few know we have private land staff. And so that's where having these relationships with the NRDs, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, some of the other agencies and organizations is really important, because we want them to. Sometimes a good example is someone comes in and says, maybe I want to enroll in one of your programs like the U.S. Department of Agriculture has, Natural Resources Conservation Service, but it's not a right fit, right? Because they have a lot of rules, and they have, and so maybe the landowner's like, well, I'm not interested in like a perpetual easement. And so if the person at the office says, well, sorry, we can't help you, then you had a person who had an interest in doing something, but it didn't meet their fit, it didn't fit their agency. We want them to know to reach out to us to say, yeah, but talk to the Game and Parks biologist to know who that person is. They have other programs or know of other sources of help. So, so that's really important to have that network, to try to not have someone just be told no and then walk away, because they probably won't come back, right? They'll be like, oh, I tried and no one's interested in wetland conservation. I've heard that from landowners. And then we do reach out to landowners. Interestingly, Rainwater Basin they've been sending out postcards to landowners. It's hard to get in touch with people because we're all deluged with information, right? But sending out postcards, they used to highlight wetlands and wildlife, got very little response. They talked about groundwater recharge and water quality and got a huge response. So from those landowners. So again, some of it's about messaging, understanding, the farmer out there, not that they don't care, but their driver isn't having a whole bunch of migrating ducks on their site, but they want recharge to the Ogallala Aquifer. And so you message about that.
Thanks, Ted. Great questions, everybody.
I see one more popping up there. So should people call? Yeah, you can call the Game and Parks office. You know, I have a list of, and Jamie, I could share that with you actually. That lists our habitat partners section biologists and what counties they cover, because it is hard. If you call the General Game and Parks office, not a criticism here because we're a big complex organization, but some people might say, I don't know who does private land stuff in Cherry County. And so I put this map together to help. I think we have it on our website somewhere, but it's not necessarily easy to find. I'll share that link with you. But,
Yeah.
But that we share with all of our partners again, because it's like that scenario where I said someone walks in and gets turned away. We want them to say, oh, contact Scott Wessel in Norfolk because he can help, or he knows who can help, or where, you know, wherever you're at in the state. So
Great question,
I'll shoot you
Jason.
that map. So
Thank you.
can share
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. And we'll talk about some events coming up, and I'll have a call to action for you. Thank you so much, Ted. You're a lovely human person. So glad to have you on.
Well, likewise, Jamie, and I appreciate the passion you bring to this, and all the great work and interest master naturalists are doing.
That's good to hear. Let's see here. So you will be getting an evaluation. For some reason, that doesn't look like I spelled it right, but you will be getting an evaluation. There will be a link. It's very quick. Please fill those out. That's how I get your feedback. That's how I know your needs and what the members want for this program. And you can also pop in any suggestions that Ted had made for maybe a wetland kind of series. Next month, we are having Glenn Pollock. Glenn is on right now with us. He's a self-proclaimed citizen science octogenarian with a bad back, and he's gonna I loved that. That was so great, Glenn. He's gonna talk to us about MODIS, this worldwide wildlife tracking system, and it's where it's placed in Nebraska. So that's going to be our October webinar. I really appreciate you, Glenn, for getting together with me to make that happen. We have our Core 24 training in October. We still have some spots available. So if you know of anyone, either let me know or let them know, and I can connect, and we can, I can get them some information or get them excited about joining us. Our conference, our annual conference, is September 28th. So it's coming up right around the corner. The agenda is going to be out soon. We have 2 sets of field activities that I'm really excited about. So the conference is on Saturday. Saturday after the conference at 6 p.m. we're Brett Anderson from the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. He is like, hey, let's set up some bat mist nets after the conference, because that piece, that part of Nebraska has the best bat diversity in the entire state. And so he offered to set up bat mist nests and do a program for us. So that's Saturday evening after the conference. And then Sunday morning, because most of us will be overnighting in Shadron, fellow master naturalist Gabby Tejeter, I might be mispronouncing her last name. She is a professor over at of geology over at UNO, and she is going to lead a guided tour of Toadstool on Sunday morning after the conference. So all details about those field activities will come after registration. Let's see, what else do we get here? Our keynote speaker is Twyla Hansen, state poet emerita. She's going to speak to connections between the natural and human world, and how those are intertwined with her stories and her poetry. She's also, her latest book of poetry, Feeding the Fire, is winner of the Nebraska Book Award, and the Willa Literary Award. So that's pretty exciting. I'm really lucky to have feel really grateful to have someone of her caliber wanting to come and hang out with us. Log your hours. Your hours are so important, everybody. They are a metric that we use to one of the metrics that we use for the success, to show the success of this program, of your program. The volunteer hours is worth over $30 an hour right now. I don't exactly understand how they come up with that calculation, but someday I will nerd out on it and I'll be able to just rattle it off to you. But showing our program partners, some of our key program partners like Crane Trust and Audubon, like all of those hours that you are putting in, we can put an economic value to those and be like, look at this. And that will, that helps increase partnerships, right? So we can show what we're giving, your time and your energy and your heart has value. And so logging those volunteer hours and your continuing education hours is just a way for you, not just for you to see, but for, some of the players to see as well. So log your hours. Okay, so our call to action. Maybe go out to one of your spots that you hang out at in nature, right? Whatever spot it is, if it's your local park, if you have a space that you drive out to, and think about the partnerships that may contribute to some of your favorite spots. And if you don't know, maybe start looking into it a little bit, just to understand all of the heart and all of the work and all of the knowledge and experience that goes into the conservation of your favorite places in Nebraska. And then also think about, like, are there voices that may not be, that can contribute, that are not already, into some of your favorite spaces in Nebraska, right? I think that there's always, because we come from, Nebraska Master Naturalists come from a different, and that's why we this volunteer organization is so valuable, is because we come from with a different perspective. We all have diverse experiences and relationship with nature, and sometimes we get in our professions or in academia, we have blinders, right? So we need these outside influences. So it's really great to think about the other voices that could maybe be a partnership that maybe aren't already to some of your favorite places that you get to hang out in Nebraska. This reflective prompt and this call to action will be also added to the post email, the follow-up email. We're 3 minutes over. I'm just going to check the chat, and I want to respect your time. Lots of thank yous and love, Ted. Looking forward to, it's great. I'm super great. Kathy, that's great. Looking forward to Glenn's presentation. Thanks for sharing this fabulous story. Great talk, Ted. Lots of love to you, Ted. So thanks for showing up, everybody. I really appreciate you. Have a really great rest of your Monday.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.